Hello and welcome to Exploring Entrepreneurship, Taking Care of Business. My name is Raul Sandoval and I'm delighted to be your moderator today. I'm an Austin Young Chamber board member and I'm also the owner and attorney of Sandoval Family Law, a family law practice here in Austin, Texas. And so Exploring Entrepreneurship is a partnership between the Austin Young Chamber and the City of Austin Economic Development Department Small Business Program. The Austin Young Chamber runs many programs throughout the year that promote business and talent development, entrepreneurship, civic engagement, and community growth. Please keep an eye on Austin Young Chamber website and social channels for more upcoming programs, pitch competitions, and business topics. We at the Austin Young Chamber are pleased to be able to work with the City of Austin to bring forward several programs that support early stage startups and small businesses. Please join me in welcoming Susanna Carbajal, Assistant Director with City of Austin Economic Development Department, to say a few words.
Welcome and good afternoon. I'm Susanna Carbajal, Assistant Director for the City of Austin Economic Development Department. Thank you to the Austin Young Chamber for hosting this event and for your partnership with the City of Austin. Thank you to all the panelists for providing your time and talent today. Today's panel discussion is about taking care of business. Panelists will offer tips on launching a startup during a recession and strategies on how to adapt your business. I'm so excited to hear about their perspective. Please mark your calendars from May 3rd to May the 7th for National Small Business Week. Here at EDD, we will have a week long of classes and events, including our kickoff event on May 3rd, the State of Austin Small Business starting at 10 a.m., following by the Small Business Awards at 11:30 a.m. We will have daily coaching hours for small businesses, creatives and nonprofits, funding panels, and so much more. Please visit our website and register at www.smallbizaustin.org. Welcome and invite Chief Economic Recovery Officer Veronica Briceño to say hello. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon. I am happy to be here with you today. As Susanna has said, we really value and appreciate our relationship with the Austin Young Chamber. And this is a great opportunity for your members and the folks participating today to learn from experts, to learn about entrepreneurism. And now more than ever, at a time when we're looking at economic recovery and how can we rebuild as a city after this pandemic, entrepreneurship is very important. So I salute you in your quest to consider starting a new business, in addition to the resources of the Austin Young Chamber and the resources that Susanna has described at our small business division with the Economic Development Department. I encourage you to always keep economic development in mind in terms of resources provided, whether it's one-on-one coaching, whether it's classes, whatever the case may be. We are here for you in your endeavor to start your own business. All of our resources can be found at atxrecovers.com. Thank you again and enjoy the session. I'll turn it back over to you, Raul.
Thank you, Veronica. Today's discussion is certainly a very timely conversation as we as business owners and entrepreneurs continue to navigate the pandemic and the recession to keep our doors open and our employees and patrons safe. The pandemic brought swift change for nearly all businesses, and there's certainly much to be learned from founders who've navigated this realm during the Great Recession of 2008, and of course now. And so today's format is going to include a 45-minute panel with our panelists, followed by 30 minutes of roundtable networking. And so as we start the panel, if you have any questions, make sure to please include them in the Q&A box versus the chat box. So there's specifically a Q&A tool so that we can answer any questions at the end if we have time. So with that, let's get started. And so I'd first like to introduce our panelists. And so to begin with, Nathan Green is the co-founder and the Chief Development Officer for Acadium. In this role, Nathan focuses on expansion of the Acadium network within the United States and internationally. He's an experienced technologist who has spent the last 12 years building higher education software companies in Texas, 2 of which have been acquired. Previously, Nathan was the founder and CEO of Campus 2 Careers, a company founded during the last recession, the general manager of North America for Pearson's talent assessment business, and an executive with Accenture. Nathan is a graduate of Cornell University, a founder of the Austin Young Chamber, and a father of 3. Next, we have Cindy Lowe. She started Red Velvet 18 years ago. And she did so with a mission to outplan, outplay, and outparty. Red Velvet is a boutique creative events and experiences agency helping global brands ideate, design, and execute their vision since 2002. During this pandemic, she has pivoted their team to own the virtual and hybrid world. Cindy is also a recent author of Behind the Red Velvet Curtain. Cindy calls Austin, Texas home with her husband of 16 years, their 2 children, and Darwin, their French bulldog. And last but not least, Mandeep Patel. Mandeep Patel is an Indian-American entrepreneur and engineer. He is the CEO and founder of Electrip, an electric vehicle business travel company, and CEO and founder of Sun Company Tracking, a hardware startup that built passive solar tracking technology. His team presented the idea at Shell's global design competition and later secured a transportation contract with Shell. A trained leader and operator, Mandeep developed his skill sets through engineering and finance experience at NASA, Lockheed Martin, United Airlines, and BP. And so I really appreciate and thank you, panelists, for joining us today. And so as we jump into question 1, let's lay some groundwork about each of your businesses, the biggest challenge you faced, and how you've pivoted over the last 12 years. And so I'm going to go ahead and call on each of you. So to begin with, Nathan, having started a successful business during the last recession, what were some strategies you focused on that may help today's entrepreneurs? And do you have any forecasting secrets to share?
Yeah, thanks, Raul. So I never intended to get into the startup space. I had a problem that I wanted to solve at my prior employer, which was Harcourt, then acquired by Pearson. And they gave me an exit opportunity after a year post-acquisition that I just couldn't decline. And I found myself with some extra cash in hand. I put some of that into starting the Austin Young Chamber, incidentally. And I was in the job market. And I figured out after lots of interviews that I wasn't going to be able to make as much as I thought I was worth because of the decline in the economy, and just many of the jobs that I was most interested in evaporated in that time frame. So I looked at the money in the bank and the some of the ideas that I had at Pearson that never got considered, and I decided to start Campus 2 Careers. During that time, I didn't take a paycheck. In fact, I spent almost every dollar that I had saved, and it was an experience that I couldn't have spent. I couldn't have done at any other point in my life. Both the stage that I was at, pre-kids, pre-marriage, the time that I had, and the fact that the opportunity cost was so low. There was just nothing else that appealed to me that spoke to me like starting this other opportunity. And so it was in those darkest days where I wondered, would it be all worth it? And the amount that, I had to invest individually, that I asked myself, what are the other options, right? At least I'm moving forward versus just sitting on my hands. So I feel like many of you are in that same position now where you feel like the careers and the prospects have evaporated on you. And so the opportunity cost is low. The chance to start something, knowing that some parts of our economy will never return to what they were, and you could pivot faster than others because you have time on your hands to solve new problems that have been presented post-pandemic, presents you with the same challenges to overcome that I had in 2008. And I wouldn't look back. It has now shaped me I am now pigeon-held in the startup community, which was not my intent when I started Campus to Careers. People will say, "Oh, well, you're going to be a startup person for life." That was also not my intent. But at this point, it's been a very worthwhile venture for me, for my family, and for the ventures that I've started. And we're now at Acadium, 42 employees from zero when we started in 2016. And also based in Austin, Texas. So thanks so much.
Wow, thank you, Nathan. We certainly appreciate that insight, and it's just insane how you've been able to pivot and be where you are today. And so I appreciate your insight, and I know we all appreciate your insight. And so, Cindy, you founded your full service events agency in 2002. And so you've weathered 2 recessions plus the events of 9/11.
Yeah.
And we know how hard each of these has affected the hospitality and events industry. And so what is different about your business response this time versus 2008 through 2010 or 9/11?
Yeah. So what's interesting is, again, I started post 9/11. So really, I always tell people there was no way but up to go because you are at the lowest point. But to answer your question of like what I would do differently, because the thing that we did do right is that we had savings. So both the 2 recessions I was in, we had savings, so we had something to fall back on. However, this most recent one, unfortunately, is still extended. We are in the midst of this pandemic still, and now I have run out of savings. So what I would have definitely done differently, looking back now, knowing what I know since we are officially at the 1-year mark, is I would have probably cut a little bit deeper. And that saddens me because honestly, if you had asked me exactly a year ago, what was in my mind at that time was, of course, to preserve as much of our team and to preserve as much of our cash so that we could extend our lifeline. And I thought we were pretty safe because I had 6 months of savings. And even if we did not sell another program, I could keep our team together. Well, what we didn't know what was about to happen and unfold is that literally every corporation that we were working with and dealing with, majority of them were going to cancel their programs and not want to pivot to virtual. So we used that time while everyone was just kind of sitting still, working from home. We quickly taught ourselves how to do virtual, but unfortunately there's not enough virtual in the funnel to make up for that lost revenue of in-person events. So I definitely would have done it differently and being more aggressive last year if I had known what I now know. We're still around because we have taught ourselves this new technology and new way of doing events. But man, I would not wish this upon anyone. So if you're about to start, I actually would encourage you to start right now because many things that Nathan just said are similar. Is that I never planned on being an entrepreneur when I graduated from college. I never planned to do this for 18 years and going. But the things that I love about it, I do wake up excited about and trying to challenge myself. So if you are at a point in life where you can start a business without being cash strapped, and hopefully it doesn't take a lot of equity to start it, I would do it now because you're more agile and there's just so many more resources available online, and social media can make you look way bigger than you really are. So I do think it's actually a good time to start a business. And so that's actually one of my things that I try to leave with people.
And one of the things that you had mentioned that I experienced in my own business is that savings during this type of pandemic. You know, I didn't expect the impact that we would have had in our family law business. In the divorces and child custody, we anticipated that there would be some kind of fall off, but man, we experienced slow business for about 2 to 3 months. And so thankfully there was that savings there that we had worked so hard to preserve. And so a follow-up question to you is there a sweet spot that you would say in terms of, and you had mentioned 6 months worth of savings. Is there a sweet spot that you would recommend or have any insight on?
Interestingly enough, the 6 months would have been normal in a normal recession because it actually helped us the last 2 times. We honestly did not even feel a bump. It did not even hurt us. We were fine. But this one, unfortunately, because of the way COVID also attacked our events industry, I really think we should have had a full year. But again, if I had been more aggressive and cut sooner, versus making bets and kind of taking a chance and thinking, okay, events will start to come back this January, then we would have been fine. And mind you, I ended up using our 6 months of savings and stretching it out to 9 months. So we managed to even, and plus the PPP, we managed to stretch our longevity a bit. But I definitely don't ever want to be in this space again where I have to kind of take that bet. And so 6 months is it's hard, to be honest, because it took me probably a full decade before we got to that point where we had truly 6 months of savings to be able to afford to pay, because at that time we were 27 full-time employees to be able to pay with no business, in sight. And honestly, we've never been like that either. We have never been a day without having some revenue come through the door. So it was just everything kind of rolled into one. And this has taught us a lot.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for sharing that, and that's great insight. And so, Mandeep, I'd like to go ahead and ask you a question. As a successful entrepreneur, actively building your startups before the pandemic hit, how have you been able to reevaluate your goals and projections and redefine your success?
Yeah, so I think two things. One, it's really easy to be an entrepreneur when you're growing at 20% a month. So when you first start out and you realize, oh man, people love the service and they're referring it to other people, that's the time where everything is really fun. And you're like, wow, I'm great. I know what I'm doing. The moment something like this happens, this is the first time I have ever seen one of my projects immediately just hit a wall, like in my life. Like I never experienced that in school. I never experienced that with the previous company. So to go from revenue to zero for 3 months, basically, that was a huge lesson that I learned. And what I realized was, and so this is something that I'm, hearing Cindy and Nathan talk, it reinforces this lesson, which is an entrepreneur's biggest advantage versus corporate is that we are hungry. Right. And we want to do the things that most people won't do. I've slept in my cars. I've driven the cars. Like I've cleaned them. This morning I was up at 5 a.m. just getting the vehicles ready. So, but there's a difference between hunger and famine. And at the point where you can no longer take care of yourself at the most basic level, you can't make rational decisions. People always say, why don't you just pivot? But it's a lot harder to do that when you have people that you're looking out for, individuals that that you don't want to let down. And so there you have to approach, I think, entrepreneurship in a much different way. Now, once you start building up a team, once you start building up a business and you have liabilities that you then are responsible for. I launched Electrip by basically putting my entire life savings at that time, so my income from my internships, into buying the first Tesla. And my mom co-signed on it. So, props to Indian moms. I don't know how they do it. They always support their kids. So I don't know what that is, but and actually in hindsight now I'm thinking maybe I should have just bought Tesla shares instead. But anyway, the point is I bought that first car, and at that point it was really easy because it just there wasn't a high burn rate, and we borrow cars from current Tesla owners, so it never got really high. But that is something that a lesson that I didn't learn the hard way. I just always intuitively knew I wanted to keep my burn rate low. And that's because I saw other entrepreneurs growing up that didn't do that and were in a really terrible situation in downturns. So, that's just, that doesn't even answer your question. That's literally just reinforcing something that I realized from listening to Cindy and Nathan talk. But getting more specifically to what it means to be a successful entrepreneur, I think it really is, you got to figure out what change you're trying to affect in the world. And Simon Sinek does a really good job of this. He says, define your why and compete in an infinite game, meaning that even if the rules change, you're still willing to move forward. So when we went to zero revenue for 3 months, what I understood was, look, our goal at Electrip, we could have measured it in rides per day. And I think that was a very good number to look at when things were going well. When things started to slow down, if I measured our success on rides per day, which I did initially, right? Because I'm saying all this because I learned the lessons from it. So we did have to suffer through it for a while, and it was really depressing. Like people at my team, one of our guys, so Elliot Lee, was actually, very early on, and I think he's in the chat today. They got really demotivated because I was like, guys, we need to increase rides per day, but how are they going to do that when 95% of our clients are corporate and they're saying, look, no travel for the rest of 2020? So if I had focused on the mission, which is to increase electric vehicle transportation, there were a lot of different ways that we could drive value. First and foremost, we found pain. We've never been outside funded. So whenever we faced a problem in the company, we've had to solve it on our own. We can't just throw money at it and solve the problem. And so in doing that, we actually developed a lot of software, a lot of really great technology that solves for common pain points like hiring drivers, making sure charge level stays well with the cars, making sure they're well maintained. So we had all these other services that we could have built out in that downturn. But this kind of ties back to the first point, which is hunger versus famine. We got lucky that we had enough cash and a low enough burn rate that we could survive and focus on these other projects. I moved back in with my parents. This is my childhood room. And that further reduced my burn rate and allowed me to focus on the actual goal, which is further advancing electric vehicle transportation. So it was a lot of learning to realize, like, don't fixate on success. That's the easy route. And that's when it's easy to be an entrepreneur. When you focus on a long-term mission, that's when it gets tough, but that's also when it's the most rewarding.
Piggyback off what Mandeep said, I couldn't agree more, because again, we were told you can't gather, you can't leave your house. So immediately I did go back to the team and go, okay, but people, we are natural human beings and we're going to want to meet. So what's the way we're going to meet? And so we actually called it redefining engagement. How do you re-engage with your prospects? How do you re-engage with your vendors? How do you even re-engage with your own employees when you cannot physically be in person? So I couldn't agree more. Go back to your original mission and redefine. And then that's how you can figure out how are you going to keep the company going? Because that's honestly why I went to virtual, because at that time I realized there's got to be more than just a normal Zoom meeting. We've got to figure out what is it that's going to work for our clients, and let's redefine it right now and make it work.
All right, I got to jump in and just say that when I started Campus to Careers, I went from a 22 square foot house to a 400 square foot studio. A lot of sacrifices getting made. So just kudos to Mandeep to make those sacrifices, because it's tough when you think about paying your employees and not paying yourself, and just constantly making those sacrifices over and over again. I mean, I can't remember how much ramen I ate during that period of my life. So I never got to famine, but I would say I was an all-time low on health. And then you're just not working out, you're not running, you're not doing all the things that you think you're going to have time to do because you have your own schedule, and you're not working those corporate hours. It was absolutely the opposite, right? And that's what it took to be successful. But you also have the time, you have the motivation, and at least at that point in my life, I was up at 2 a.m. because I was working, not because of a 2-year-old. I don't know which is better, incidentally, but either one's tough.
I don't know if this is still the same stat I've quoted in the past, but it took us 3 years to really be on a strong trajectory of scalability and growth, because we also did not take outside investors. So I started my business with only $8,000. I did start it initially out of my house. Then in the third year, we did move into an office space. And then eventually, again, we're 18 years old now. We have our own offices that we even bought. So it does happen. But you have to be realistic about your goals and your cash burn rate. And that's why I always say cash is king, and you got to figure out how to do it smartly. And at the beginning, I didn't pay myself, honestly, what my market value was. And I was just about trying to get the business to a scalable rate. And then right now, because we're in this pandemic, I also stopped paying myself. So I haven't actually paid myself since April 1st, because my goal is to keep as many of our team together, even though we've downsized, but to get out hopefully by on the other side, as many as we can realistically. And I realized that couldn't have happened if I didn't build up, again, my savings over the years.
Yeah, I think that's all great insight. I mean, I feel like I've experienced what all of you have mentioned, and my business is a little, I started about 2.5 years ago, almost 3 years ago, so it's definitely much younger than what y'all have put together. But it's that same sort of taking care of your own, taking care of your team, sacrificing, my pay to make sure that my people are taken care of. One of the other things that I've personally experienced is also not being ashamed to just ask for help, finding people who I feel are smarter than me to just help me get on the right track and help me figure this out. Because I don't know about any of your backgrounds personally, but nobody in my family has ever started their own business, run their own business. So I couldn't ask them at all for any kind of help. So don't be afraid or ashamed to ask for people within your industry for some help and some insight, which is something that I did that eventually led me to working with a business coach who has really helped me keep on track and make sure that I stay focused. And heck, she's almost like a therapist, in our monthly meetings, in discussing where we are and what we need to do. So great insight all around. And so with that, let's go ahead and address another question. One question we've kind of already talked about and we've touched on is how each of you have been able to reevaluate your market and reestablish your products or services to meet this change. So I'm not sure if there's anything else that any of you would like to add as it relates to that question. But Nathan, how have you been able to reevaluate your market and reestablish your products or services to meet this change in the pandemic, government restrictions, and other uncertainty?
Yeah, so we're blessed to be in online education at Acadium, where the hotels.com of higher ed is what I like to share. So to give you a sense, this downturn, I'm on the upside of it. There's always winners and losers. Last crisis, I was on the losing side and struggled through it. This time we're on the positive end. It really has shaped our business. We just closed another round of funding at 3x what it was because of the growth in online education and the demand for our work. So, we work with now very elite schools that used to say, we don't believe in online education. And now they have to because they had to do it themselves and realize just how difficult it was. My wife's a professor. She had to figure out how to go synchronous, and for the first time, she understood what our business, was set out to do. So we've absolutely been benefiting from the shift to online. More than half of our employees I have not met in person because they've been added since the pandemic, and we have 5 open recs right now in the company. So. What we need to figure out, Raul, is how to capitalize on this because it won't be forever. There will be a new normal, and we need to work with our clients, which are institutions, to identify how we can support the new normal, which in Texas includes, I think, 70 higher education institutions. January 1st, because of the demand for our work at corporations and in international sectors, I became the chief development officer rather than chief revenue officer, and I'm focused on what's next for the company. And so my schedule has gotten a little unruly. So like tomorrow, I'm up at 6 a.m. meeting with FICCI, which is the Chamber of Commerce for India, on how to bring online education from U.S. institutions to India. Earlier this week, I was on with the largest school in Germany. So my life has definitely gotten complicated. Half of my meetings, my daughter will come in, and before the pandemic, all she knew of Zoom was just dancing with her cousins across the country. So the first 5 or 6 meetings she saw me on, she would just come in and start doing a dance in front of the provost and president, which was awkward. So those are the kind of challenges that we're experiencing, but I would say by and large, they're all positive. And again, we just were on the right side of the equation this time. And it's all luck, no talent, and sort of catch up for the many other ventures that I was on the other end of it. So Acadium is hiring. Check out our website. We're based in Austin, and all 5 open recs are in Austin. So
definitely riding that wave, right? It's when we catch it as an entrepreneur, you ride that thing until you can, because that's definitely it's all the fruits that we as entrepreneurs really want to do for ourselves, our family, our people, our team, and our local community. So thank you for sharing that. And Cindy and Mandeep, I know that you essentially have touched on the evaluating the market and reestablish your products or services to meet this change. So what I'll do is I'm going to jump to the next question, since you all have essentially touched on answering that question. So Cindy, I'll start with you. What would you say is the single most important thing you did for your business during this recession or the last that you would credit with helping your business not only to survive, but to thrive?
This is one that is easier, again, when you're small, and it takes a little bit if you're a bigger company, but it's transparency. We've always been a transparent company, but we've been even more transparent because we had to share with them our cash burn rate. And I think that honestly brought a little bit of a pit in my tummy because I was worried that they were going to freak out when they saw what was happening behind the curtain. But at the same time, once we told them, they also felt at ease of understanding how the money. So when you close a program, where does it go? How does it pay for? How much money are we losing or winning? And how far away are we from our goal? So I will say that it has been a greater education, especially for some of those that didn't understand, like, oh, when you close $1 million deal, it doesn't exactly mean $1 million towards our profit line. Like they now could see how all the expenses were paid, from rent to salaries to benefits to everything. So I would definitely encourage people to have that type of transparent conversation. And the thing, I think, Raul, you said it earlier, which was, if you are not good at something, you need to bring in someone that is better than you to do that. So luckily I do enjoy numbers, but let's say I didn't enjoy it. I would want to bring in someone that understands this, because you don't want to be living in a bubble and thinking that everything is okay just because you have the money in the bank and you don't understand that how much of that is advance payment versus actual revenue that's for you, for your business. So knowing your numbers and books are very important, I think, especially during a pandemic.
Couldn't agree more. And so, Mandeep, I'll ask you the same. What would you say is the single most important thing you did for your business during the recession or the last that you would credit with helping your business not only to survive, but to thrive?
Yeah. So again, the moment you note it, like if you know that your revenue is going to drop, because it's Cindy and I probably had the same problem where we were trying to figure out when travel was going to return. And so we would contact our clients, and they also didn't know, because a lot of our lawyers would ask, then they would ask the judges, like, when our courts are going to open. And so it was just like a chain of like people not knowing what's going on. So the immediate thing we did was cut everything we could. So we refinanced our cars, extended the window for that. And let all our drivers know, hey, this is not going to return anytime soon, which was very unfortunate. But because we kept that communication going with drivers and our flex fleet owners, so it's like the people that own Teslas in our company, as well as with our customers, just to kind of let them know, like, hey, when travel does return and you feel safe enough, we are here. We started to kind of have all the framework ready to come back when travel did return. So what we notice now is that a lot of people that do need to sign deals with transportation companies can't find the typical limo company because they went out of business. They had lots of vehicles that they personally signed for with fixed, burn rates, and they ran out of money and they had to shutter, which is very unfortunate. We see that like almost 1 out of every 4 limo companies is now gone. And so they have all this new demand for transportation that no one else can fill, but we still have a fresh list of drivers who are now willing to drive at lower rates. We have our vehicles ready to go. So we kind of have the infrastructure ready to start bidding on projects before everyone else can. And so for a typical, project that maybe we've competed with 2-3 other guys in the past, now it's like we get to be the only person bidding on it. And the downside is, unfortunately, that we still don't know whether transportation is truly going to return. So we are taking on some additional risk, but we almost get first mover advantage in a industry that is not first mover at all. Like black car service is like old as heck. So that's kind of, I think, something to think about is like anything, like it's $0 for me to message my driver and say, hey, I hope you're doing well. Just letting you know, we don't know when travel is going to return back, but watch this video on how to train on this or whatever, and you'll be the first person we contact. So that was free for us, and it kept us kind of able to bounce back faster.
Thanks for sharing that. I'd like to, before we transition, I'd like to make sure that you all have a chance to answer this last question. What advice would you give to entrepreneurs just starting out, or even those looking to make adjustments for their existing business that might help them navigate the current economic climate And so Nathan, I'll go ahead and let you give us what your insight on that.
Is this, Raul, the question in the QA or separate from that because they're related?
Well, I'd like to address that separately once we finish with this last question. But yeah, if you want to tackle, if you want to go ahead and merge your response to both questions, let me go ahead and say this out loud, the question in the Q&A as well. So there's difficult conversations with members of your team in relation to changes within your business. Do you have advice on how to handle those conversations?
Yeah, so for me, and again, we're on the upside this time at Acadian, but with Campus to Careers, it was just a lot of transparency. It was just being honest and open. And as I talked about before, showing that big sacrifices are being made. And I have the company that acquired Campus to Careers didn't take that same philosophy. And so I've been on both ends of it. And I can tell you as an employee, post that acquisition, what it was like to make sacrifices, and the CEO, who's a friend of mine, so I'm not going to use his name here, didn't make those sacrifices, right? As we were taking pay cuts, he or she was buying a new house. And, I learned that if I'm ever in that position again, the hard answer of just not only making the sacrifice, but communicating that you're making the sacrifice so that it's clear, that everybody knows that, it starts at the top, right? And so otherwise, I think, and I'm just going to piggyback off of one of the comments Mandeep shared about just the staying out of the famine realm, is the ability to pivot when you're as small and nimble as as all of our organizations are still, is what will make us successful. And then all of us will rebound when the economy picks back up. I mean, Cindy, there'll be so much pent up demand for people getting together. I mean, I've got like 6 vacations planned because every time we can't go somewhere, I promise my kids, okay, as soon as summer hits and we're vaccinated, and it's like, okay, I'm going to be gone for 3 months, right? At this point, I'm hoping they forget. They're at that age where they can forget. But there will be all this pent up demand. And so everyone that survives these lean years or months left, I think we'll be in much stronger position to be successful when we come out of it. And that's what we have to do to stay in the game for now.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with you on starting from the top, right? Is that if you're having these tough conversations with members of your team, I mean, I like to lead by example and say, hey, look, here's the sacrifice I'm making for us, for our organization. So I think that a lot of people do follow those leaders who can lead by example and make those sacrifices. So as it relates to the question of how to handle those conversations, I think from my perspective, it's just showing what I'm doing at the top as the owner of the organization, and say, hey, this is we're all in this together. So with that said, Cindy, I'll ask you the same. What advice would you give to entrepreneurs just starting out, or even those looking to make adjustments for their existing business that might help them navigate the current economic climate? And in relation to that, do you have any advice on having those tough conversations with members of your team?
I'm going to repeat. So I'm going to split the 2 questions, the one on the Q&A and the original question you asked, Raul. But I did say it earlier, cash is king. So if you really don't have, so when I started my business 18 years ago, I knew I had the ability to, even if I did not garner any cash, I knew I would be fine for running a business that was basically not profitable for a year. And then I would reevaluate it. But if you don't know that answer, like if you can't say that off the top of your head and you're going to be, as Mandeep called it, if you're going to be like dying and famine, that's not a good thing. Don't start the business in. But if you know you've got a cushion, like for example, your partner can take care of the mortgage and you can go and focus on this business, I say do it, because this is the best time to do it, honestly. Again, you cannot go anywhere but up. And in fact, I even tell people right now, even though as disrupted as our industry has been, as in hospitality, this is our chance. It almost like reset the entire playing field. So it is our chance to kind of come out and show what you're made of So if you have a new idea for engagement and whatnot, this is your chance to kind of make it and do it on your way, you know? As far as the question to your how to deliver bad news, this one was tricky because so many people handled the pandemic so differently. So as I mentioned before, we were a team of 27. And as we were, you know, we switched to work from home right away and we were dealing with the pivot and all this, we quickly realized that there were two types, at least on our team, of handling the pandemic. Ones, they literally could not, like, they could not focus on seeing beyond what was happening. Like, oh my gosh, we're stuck at home. We're not allowed to go out, mask, no mask, yada, yada. And we realized that they were not going to last because I could feel it. I didn't know how long this would be, but I could feel that this was going to be for the long run. So I would ask them just genuinely, like, how are you mentally feeling? Because right now I need 200% of you, even though I realize it is very devastating. All of our events have canceled. We're learning new stuff. It's tricky. But if we were to give you like 1 week of a mental break and come back, can you do it? And unfortunately, sadly, some of them couldn't because they just could not get beyond the devastation of the pandemic. And in reality, when you're a small business, you have to make some tough decisions. So we did make some tough calls at that very beginning to, you know, to separate because it wasn't doing our team any good and it wasn't doing them any good because we were operating as if we were a startup 18 years ago, trying to reevaluate, redefine us. And this time I was like, you know, we don't know what's it's going to look like, but we're going to hustle and we're going to work really hard. And to be honest, we've worked harder, I feel like, in the last 12 months than we have in the last decade because we have to survive. So I think it's just having that honest conversation of, are you in it to hustle? Because I think some people during this pandemic were better off knowing they were going into a job and doing A, B, C, T task. But when I say, hey, guess what? Today we're going to do this, but next week we might focus on this. It was tough. And so just being transparent about it.
Thank you for sharing that. I mean, I think it's with this pandemic and even the previous recession, you meet the fork in the road. You could either, just decide this is really difficult and I can't really get out of bed. I can't move. What am I going to do? And yes, those are valid, very valid feelings. But you got to have this dogged mentality of this is not going to overtake what we've started or what we're doing. And so it's really pushing through. And as you put it, Cindy, just hustling and making it work. And so I appreciate you saying that. And Mandeep, finally, I'll ask you the same question. What advice would you give to entrepreneurs just starting out, or even those looking to make adjustments for their existing business that might help them navigate the current economic climate? And then also, what advice would you give in having those tough conversations with members of your team?
Sure. So to the first point, for people that are trying to pivot or start a new business, identify which sectors were hit the hardest because those are the places where you get the best deals. So for example, for drivers, right? Drivers are really looking for work right now. You can get the best of the best, and this is unfortunate to say, but you can get them at lower rates than you normally would. And so I'm sure there's plenty of examples of this where even like PPE, right? So people overproduce PPE, and as we start to vaccinate, demand for that's like dropping precipitously. Prices have dropped. I don't know what that could be used for, but there's all these opportunities for places where you can get great deals and start ideas. And people that were operating at really high burn rates can't take advantage of those deals, and people that overinvested too early, they can't take advantage of those deals. So if you're looking, like everybody's been saying on the panel, like this is a great time, just identify where you get good deals, right? So so there's that. And then for those hard conversations, I think I don't have as much experience, so I honestly can't really give you guys good advice on that. But I will say one thing that helped a little bit was, we were just very honest with the team. Just look, this is what it is. And then we have this like Google sheet, which has a bunch of macros on it to track our monthly performance. And we put a sheet in front of that was just like Catan tracking. And so like every other day we'd all as a team like get together and do like 4v4s or whatever we could and just drink and chit chat. And like that was like an outlet And so it was literally just like, because people are getting a little looser. And so we found a lot of stuff out about our team on a personal level that we didn't know, which was really great, because it gave me better insight on, why they didn't deliver a certain week or what could have been hurting them. So that's probably like the best advice I can give on that. I just don't have a lot of experience there.
Much for that insight, and what I'd like to do before we transition to the roundtable networking, there's one last question in the Q&A that I'd like for any of you to just go ahead and jump in. And so this is a good question. What are those signals that you've spotted in the past that have helped you pivot or course correct? And so essentially, when do you think it's better to just push through and persevere with plan A rather than saying, you know what, I think we should go to plan B? So any of you who would like to tackle that question?
I just want to make a quick general comment before answering that. So Cindy's in the services industry. I'm in the tech industry. Mandeep, I imagine you've got some pretty significant upfront hardware, or at least in this case, Tesla costs, right? So 3 different industries. We've all had to weather the storm differently according to the role that we play. And obviously today, and this is, something Mandeep shared, there's just a lower cost for capital, right? Things are cheaper. And I don't mean just pandemic. I mean, just starting a new company can be done quicker from your room without travel expenses with a Zoom account. On Saturday night, we registered for a magic show. And Justin Willmans, the Netflix guy. And I thought we were going to be in a small, intimate room, 980 families zoomed in. At $25, I thought I was getting a steal. I mean, he made, $20,000 in a single night, in a single hour. Besides his Zoom account, right, there was no upfront cost. So this is a person that made all of his money doing stand-up, in-person magic, that is now a multi-millionaire based on how many shows he's got sold out just in the last month. So those are the opportunities to capitalize on. And it probably took him and many others many months to figure out how to pivot. Raul, back to your question. But I think you just have to find a way through, stay upbeat, talk to others, talk to the city of Austin. That's how I got some expertise when I was starting Campus Careers. I really didn't know how to do anything except build websites at the time. And I was able to surround myself with smarter people on all the other aspects of how to write a business plan and how to develop a pro forma. I didn't actually know what a pro forma meant or what that word was at the time of starting the business, right? So you don't even have to know that you want to start a business to be successful starting a business. But it does take a lot of perseverance, a lot of late nights, a lot of pivots or restarts, and then just staying close to your customer or the market. And so that's my way of figuring out how to answer that wrapping question. All that to say, I wish I had become a magician younger in life. Then I would have a much easier path to retirement. So.
Thank you, Nathan. I appreciate it. And with that, we'll go. Unless Cindy, do you want to question?
Oh, sure. I was gonna just say I 100% agree with Nathan. I think that answer, though, to that question, it does depend on a lot of intersections crossing together. So, for example, if I was at least 20 years older and I was already on the brink of retirement, I probably would not have pivoted. I would probably have just winded everything down, to be honest, But because I'm not at that pivotal moment and I know how profitable our industry can be, I was determined to pivot and make sure that we could stay in there because we were already a leader in our market. So I was like, why can't we just become a leader in a new market? We just have to learn it. And that was the part that was probably going back to the original question or the first Q&A, which was, that was the tough part, was to convince our team to learn new skills so that we could pivot, because that's not, when they joined our company, that isn't what we were known for. We were known for live events. And so to all of a sudden to be the experts in virtual, they were just like, what? We aren't TV producers. We aren't this magician that can do online, so how are we going to make money? So I think you have to look at multiple intersections, how old you are, Is your industry that you're trying to do, is it even profitable? Do you have a following? Do you have a way to be able to use whatever you figure out that you're going to sell? Do you have an audience that's going to buy from it? And if you feel like you can, then I think it's worth exploring the pivot. But if you don't, you know what? It's a good excuse as any to start a new business. And like Nathan and Mandeep already said, yeah, it's cheap right now to buy hurt businesses. And that was actually something I had been even looking into to figure out if that was one of our pivots.
If you don't mind me adding, so this was huge for me to determine whether or not to continue to try to address transportation. I think you really have to ask, how much inertia do you have in a current idea? So how many fixed costs do you, well, this is again for a very hardware focused business. So again, a bunch of different perspectives, but like, I guess I can liken this back to, I remember in high school, this one kid bought 2,000 fidget spinners. Like he bought like 2,000 fidget spinners. And he was like, oh, I'm going to sell these for like a huge profit. But then like the next month, fidget spinners were out of business, right? So no one cared about them anymore. It's like, how's he going to pivot with that? Like that's a fixed asset that spins, and that's all it does. Like he can't like repurpose that for like tires on a skateboard or something. I don't know. But the point is, like, that's like, I think so if you're at a point where you're overcapitalized and you have to make, you know, a certain investment work, then I think the idea is stick with plan A and wait it out. But if you still have capital, then I think that's when you can start looking at plan B, because you know it's like those people that buy GameStop at like $500, right? Like, and then they sell at 100. Like, it's just like they get really squeamish. So you just gotta, like, I guess, stick with it a little bit longer if you've already capitalized on it. And again, at a certain point, you believe that idea was going to work, and the world may permanently shift, and that's when you have to question, should I stay on it? So for example, if I strongly believe that there would be no more in-person meetings, then I would say, okay, Electrip needs to be folded because this isn't going to work. But my philosophy and why I stuck with my plan was that the people that do meet in person once vaccines come out are going to have an edge when negotiating for contracts over the people that don't. If you're at a deposition and you're in person, this role, I think this kind of to your point, but like if you're in a deposition in person versus someone zooms in, and I don't know if you guys remember that lawyer that turned into a cat. I don't know. There's it's like a huge disadvantage. So yeah, that's kind of how I would look at it, is like, how much capital have you invested, and are there permanent changes that will mess up your investment?
Wow. Okay. Thank you guys so much. I mean, at this time, it's time to transition to our roundtable networking. But Nathan, Cindy, Mandeep, thank you all for your time, for your expertise. I know I learned a ton. I know we've all learned a ton. And so we can't thank you enough for spending the time and sharing your thoughts and insight with us. And so attendees, now it's time for a bit of networking. And once we end presentation mode, you're going to be able to move from table to table by double clicking on the table that you'd like to join. And so you could then turn your camera and your mic on, which are going to be at the bottom of your screen, and then you could start networking. And so this platform is going to be open for that roundtable discussion until 12:45 p.m. And so thank you all very much again for attending and joining us today, Exploring Entrepreneurship program, and we'll see you at the tables.